But I create these scenes, and in the book, I need to kind of stitch them together. It's almost like this patchwork. How do I get from that scene that I love to the next scene or the scene before? There has to be some link. And in the script, it's a lot easier because the scenes don't have to be stitched together as much.
Welcome to Modern Publishing. I'm Victoria, author, editor, and the owner of Blue Pen, and today I'm on with Anthea T. Piscarik. Anthea has established a professional writing career as both a creative writer and a news reporter. She also holds degrees in theater and is currently marketing 5 screenplays. She's published the first 2 books of her historical fiction series, The Miriam Chronicles, and Anthea happens to be a client of Blue Pen as well. We helped her with the editing and design for the second book in that series, The Years in Between. So, Anthea, to start things off, I'd love to just hear about the trajectory of your writing career. You have a really diverse background, so I'm definitely interested to hear, how did you get to where you are?
Thank you, Victoria. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Or this afternoon. I'm just back from Los Angeles, so I'm still on West Coast time. But no, writing has been my passion since I was a child. I used to write little stories. Actually, I had to in school. But I decided I needed to let the world know what these stories are, and I became a freelance journalist. And my favorite thing to write were feature articles, because the people that I interviewed were like characters, and their quotes were the dialogue for their characters. And after a few years of doing that freelance feature writing, and also editorial writing for a local newspaper, I knew it was time to create my own characters. I loved learning about other people, but now I wanted to own these characters myself. So I wrote a short story, and that short story was published twice. And then I decided, I really love the dialogue. So I went into writing a couple of plays, one-act plays that were also produced on stage in a one-act play festival and a reader's theater. And I just loved hearing characters. So beyond the playwriting, I learned screenwriting through Act 1 writing for Hollywood. So there really was a progression from being a news reporter into more creative writing, and then the playwriting, the short stories, and then the screenwriting. And that was my biggest challenge, because that's a whole world of an industry that I had to learn about. And I'm a very visual person. I'm an identical twin, so I'm pretty sure I obviously know I was never alone from day one. So I had this visual way of storytelling, and I thought, wow, screenwriting is perfect for me because it's such a visual way of telling a story. And I loved it. The only thing that was a challenge is that 1 minute of screen time is 1 page of screenwriting. So I had to really minimize my writing, my storytelling into that visual concept, just visual, no description. So, I went that direction, and I really mined that, and I started writing more scripts and wrote 5 spec scripts. And then when I was getting ready to write my 6th one, Unearthing Christmas, I decided, I've been through this long enough. I've been in this game of screenwriting. I need to get back to a more descriptive way of writing. So I started Unearthing Christmas, my first novel, as a screenplay, and decided right very early on to switch to a book, a novel. And it was a learning thing for me, Victoria, because I also was a professional grant writer up until the end of this year. And I had become very sparse in my writing and verbs. Like I was down to like 5 verbs, offer, support, provide. And I thought, wow, where is my creative writing gene going, or my brain? And it was a struggle to create description in a novel, but it did very well. I mean, I had people calling me saying how much they liked it. So, I've seen that the screenwriting, everything I've done has somehow affected my writing, and I've had to kind of regroup and relearn, because there's so many different disciplines of writing. There's the grant writing, there's the script writing, there's the playwriting, and then there's the novel writing. I mean, it all comes from the creative side of me, but there's certain disciplines that I had to apply to make those successful for what I felt was a success. Yeah. So that's the long story of it.
This is so interesting, and I already have so many questions for you, especially about how those different disciplines inform each other. I've tried my hand at screenplay writing in college, just kind of messing around. But I've definitely never done any of that professionally. I think my first question for you is, how do you find that your dialogue differs when you're writing a novel versus a script?
Good question. So the springboard for a script and the dialogue is a visual. And the springboard for a novel is some piece of information that has been written, like a different kind of backstory. The backstory is written, even if it comes out through dialogue or some little piece of what happened before. But in screenwriting, it's all visual. Everything that informs your story is from that visual aspect. So in that respect, and this is a really interesting, I'm so glad you asked that, because right now I'm writing my third book. And I create these scenes because I am this visual person. Now, whether it's because I'm an identical twin, but I'm sure I'm not the only visual person. I just happen to get my information as a visual person from being an identical twin. It's obviously impacted my life in ways that I probably don't even know. But I create these scenes, and in the book, I need to kind of stitch them together. It's almost like this patchwork. How do I get from that scene that I love to the next scene or the scene before? There has to be some link. And in the script, it's a lot easier because the scenes don't have to be stitched together as much as you do in a novel. Because otherwise, you're just going to have all these, compositive scenes that don't make the story come to life. But with a script, it's, the scene is that, I love it because you live within the scene. And in a book, the scene has to be informed by the plot more so than the character. I mean, the character is obviously important to both, but you don't have the luxury of just a second of visual of a cinematic moment to create it. It's interesting because as a scene writer, it's really tough to be in the novel world for me. I am now in my drafts, I'm writing scenes, and now I got to figure out how they're going to come together. So that's my challenge right now.
Yeah, I know I've edited books where you can tell that the author is using tactics that they have seen in movies, especially with one of the worst offenders that works very well in movies and TV shows, but does not tend to work well in books, is the prologue. Specifically the prologue where you start with a flash forward, something that happens later in the story, a moment of high tension, and you start with this little out of time piece and then come back to it. And I'm sure you can think of a ton of examples in movies and TV shows where that works, right. But that doesn't work so well for novels.
No, because you have to backtrack, and you can't always put all those pieces together. And I've started listening to a lot of novels just because as a writer I need to be reading, and I don't always have the time. So when I'm doing some menial task, I'll start listening audio books, and some books do not work very well in audio because I've seen this trend. And I've seen brilliant writing where each chapter is like a monologue. And it's very well, it works really well in the audio world. But I'm not always getting all of the story because it's all these beautifully written pieces of story where you have introduce a new character with each chapter. But I'm not getting the whole breadth of the story of how this world is created and how these characters really come together to tell the central story. And I see how it doesn't work with some really best-selling books. So I think I'm doing a disservice listening to the book when I need to be actually picking it up and reading it, so that unfortunately I need to go back and see, who is this character again? So, that's my challenge as an author, is to make sure that that story is so solid that it doesn't come across as these beautifully written monologues or, pieces of writing that inform the chapter but don't inform the story. So
That's a good point. I imagine you must have perhaps difficulties. I don't know. Be my question for you. But with novels, in the modern the modern industry, we expect a close point of view. Historically, that was not the case. Historically, we trended toward omniscient point of views and these kind of bird's eye level views of the story. And now we're moving toward this very close, intimate POV, whether it's first person or third person, where we want the reader to feel like they are right there with the character in their mind. And that, I imagine, must be very different than writing a script where, you that's not possible. You're viewing it through the lens of the camera.
Yes. And I struggle with that, Victoria. With my second book, The Years in Between, I was told by my former publisher that I was into too many people's heads. I was doing the head hopping. And I thought, as the omniscient person in this story of seeing everything that was going on, I was able to do that. I thought I'd get away with it because I wanted the readers to know what was in different people's heads. But I was told, no, Anthea, you can't do that. You can only be in one person's. So I had to it was on arm wrestling. I had to say, can I be in two? I was playing this game, okay, I'll just pick two people I can be in their heads and everyone else will be informed. The reader will be informed by what they say. And it was a challenge because I had to go back and rewrite some characters so that they were not something that was revealed by what they were thinking. It was only revealed by their dialogue or an action. So yeah, that was a challenge for me. But I think it made me a more succinct writer, a more focused writer. And it's interesting because I will read other books and I thought, well, they're breaking that rule left and right. It's who makes these rules? It's whatever works, whatever makes the story compelling, whatever makes someone invested in who those characters are. But I took the advice because I'm someone who learns from advice. I mean, I know what it's like to get script notes from a producer. I've had a script changed 11 times based on the producer's notes or the director's notes. And I know what it's like to challenge myself to give someone what they think it needs. But I also know what it's like to kind of draw the line too. So I will kind of break a rule when I think it's the best solution or the alternative to make the story better. But yeah, you're right. It's really the close person. I was told you can do first person close or close omniscient, but not in more than one or two people's heads throughout the entire story. I don't know how you feel about that. I'm going to switch this around here because I'd love to know someone else's thought on that.
Well, I'll kind of start by defining head hopping, both for the purposes of the conversation, but also because, I'm sure not everyone listening knows what head hopping is.
Me too.
Yeah, so head hopping happens specifically in third person limited point of view. So when you are using a narrator, you're using third person pronouns. Let's say you have your main character, you're writing in third person limited point of view. Mm-hmm. You are not going to give information that your main character could not know. So let's say that your protagonist meets somebody on the street. You might tell the reader that the stranger on the street looks nervous. They're keeping their purse kind of close to their body. Their eyes are shifty. You know, we can tell the reader that because your protagonist can see that. But we can't tell the reader that that stranger was mugged 2 days ago,
right,
and now is nervous to be out in public, because the protagonist does not know that.
Right.
So when you have stories that you are hopping around and giving information that different characters have access to, then that's what we refer to as head hopping.
Yes.
Now, you can have multiple POV characters, but you would have clear breaks showing where they change. And a lot of the times you'll alternate chapters. Head hopping also does not exist in third person omniscient, because in omniscient, the narrator is all-knowing. They know everything, so you can tell the reader anything you want in omniscient, but like we were saying, that is a much less popular point of view these days. Not that it isn't done. I'm currently reading Once Upon a River, which is a fantastic book, and it breaks all of these rules that we're talking about.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's kind of the definition of head hopping, and we're avoiding it because primarily it breaks that intimate connection that the reader has with the POV character.
Right.
But like all rules, you have to understand them before you can break them.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. That in all of writing, whatever discipline that you're utilizing. And in the case of the years in between, there's the main character who was devastated by something that happened in her life. And her first day back to school, someone passes her a note thinking it would somehow comfort her. And it had the total opposite effect. She was devastated by what was written in the note. And then later on, that character comes up to her in the cafeteria. But I said what was going on in his head. And that's the rule that I broke. I was not, according to my publisher, not allowed to let the reader know what was going on in his head, of how he couldn't believe how that could have had such an effect, a negative effect on her. Yeah, I mean, which is a horrible thing for any of us. We think we're going to help someone. We end up making it worse for them by what we say or write. So I had to get out of his head and just show her reaction to him approaching. So I wasn't allowed to reveal anything that he was thinking at all. So it kind of made him feel two-dimensional, but it kept us in focus of her, the main character. And that was the struggle, that was what I had, and that was like page 5 of the novel. So, I was already with my publisher going through these little okay, what are we going to do next? So it was a tough battle, but I got through. Plus I had to cut 100 pages.
Thanks to our viewers for hanging out with us today. I hope this conversation inspired you to blaze your own trail in the publishing industry. The full episodes are available as podcasts. You can just search for Modern Publishing wherever you get your podcasts, or head over to bluepinbooks.com/modernpublishing. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. And happy writing, as always. That's it for today. I'll see y'all next time.